Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Think, Engage, Thrive. I'm happy that you joined us tonight. As always, we try and bring you a great variety of entrepreneurs and people that work with entrepreneurs and people that help entrepreneurs, so you get to understand what it takes to be a great entrepreneur yourself and anybody who's ever thought about starting a business. This is the show to watch because we bring you guys that have been doing it, guys that have scaled, guys that have failed. And tonight we've got a doctor. It's first time we've ever had a doctor. Don't worry, he's not that kind of doctor. So he's he's got a PhD. He's a leadership coach. He's got a consulting company called Live for Yourself Consulting, which I love the name. But he's basically he was in talent management for corporations. He's worked with some of the biggest corporations: Amazon, Blue Cross Blue Shield, DoorDash, Google, etc. He'll tell you the whole story. But the beauty of it is, what we really want to find out, because he understands talent, he understands the psychology of people, what it takes to be great leaders, what it takes to be great executives, what it really takes to be great founders. And so, he does a lot of work for with organizations, and I think that it's good to hear a perspective like that. I've not had anybody on here in that way. We've never had a doctor on the show, but he's not that kind of doctor. So I'm going to bring him in now, Dr. Benjamin Ritter. So we'll find out his story. We'll figure out how he can make us all better leaders, better entrepreneurs, better executives. Ben, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. And, I was kind of wondering what to do with my career as in healthcare. I was pretty unhappy and I had some pretty poor leadership all around me that were making a pretty terrible place to work. And I had to work on myself first though. But while I was working on myself, I go, wow, things would be a lot different if I had a different style of leadership around me. And I said, well, how do I learn about self-leadership? Well, I might as well go learn about leadership. And so combine the two. And obviously that lends itself to entrepreneurship. So really happy to hopefully share some advice and add some value to the world right now.
Yeah, that'd be great. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background, bit of history into you, yourself, what you've done, how you did it, why you did it, those kinds of points.
All the fun stuff. Let's get in the time machine. Go back in time,
Always
jump on
good
my
to look
hoverboard.
back. It's always good to look back.
So first off, I think it's important just to talk about the mentality around the 9 to 5. And, I had two different very type of parents. I had a mom who was at the same job for a very, very long time in education. And I had a father who really was kind of with us mostly at home, but also made money the way that he could. So I went with him on home remodeling jobs. He had his own little repair business. So I got experience in, forgetting to eat because you're putting up drywall, or you're in a basement covered in sewage and you're going to rented a router from Home Depot or something like that.
Yeah.
And he always just, I was pretty, he didn't really like working for anybody else. So it was nice to have kind of that role model in terms of, you can do things your own way. There is not one way to work. And so I had these two very different experiences, and I think I've learned to kind of leverage risk as an entrepreneur, which is important. But lo and behold, when I decided to figure out what I wanted to do for my career, I chose professional sports. And so I learned the wrong advice about following your purpose and dedicated my entire life to trying to become a professional soccer player. When you define your life based on an external goal, you don't develop a very healthy sense of confidence. You tend not to create a positive community around you, and you don't really invest in anything else. So you lose one thing, you lose everything. Lo and behold, I lost everything. And so now I'm kind of sitting in my career wondering what to do. The major that I also chose in college was canceled. And so the things that I was passionate about didn't seem to work out. I kind of didn't have a lot of faith in what everyone might call a career. And that led me to decide to create my own career and not feel like I had to do things the way anyone else told me that they needed to be done. Yeah. And that kind of empowered my interest in entrepreneurship, but also to balance it with make money where you can. And so I've worked internal for organizations. I've built a career within corporations themselves, but I've always balanced that with multiple facets of business ownership and also investment at this point, because I've done fairly well for myself. And so we're here today. I kind of shared with you, I was unhappy in healthcare. I was working full time, had a business on the side, was also bartending pretty much almost full time while going to school full time to get my doctorate. Was hustling in the very much so. And decided though that I was doing way too much and didn't care about anything that I was doing because of my disappointments in the past. And so I decided to take a really hard look at my life and actually become a little bit more intentional and value aligned towards what I wanted to create. And all my experiences led me down the path of talent development, leadership development, and personal development. And lo and behold, I decided to go then pave that path and fill in the gap between what I wanted to create and where I was. And we can talk about what that entailed, but it was building basically a service-based business. And that's where we are today.
You just said something that sort of startled me. So I just want to take you back, not to undo what as far as we got, but you were talking about dedicating yourself to soccer, and then you said that doesn't help you build confidence. And I would think that the opposite of, I don't look it right now, but I used to do triathlons, and I used to do, I used to run, cycle, and such. And I felt the opposite. Like when I did that stuff, when I accomplished this goal, that it did make me, it did provide more confidence. And I would think that as an athlete, winning or accomplishing things or getting recognized would help you build confidence.
So very, very astute. And I think there's a lesson in there. If you zoom in on your achievements, you can highlight the success. But when you zoom out and look to the end goal, it's very easy to become discouraged. And so I had a picture on my wall. It said, somewhere, someplace, someone is practicing when you are not. And when you meet them, they will beat you. And I had this mentality that I had to do everything I could to become the best that I could, to make the most of where I was. And lo and behold, though, I was not the best of the players out there. And so I was doing everything that I could, practicing, not everything, but I was practicing 3 times a day. I changed my diet, I changed my workout, didn't watch anything on TV. I was, other than videotapes of soccer. I was videotapes, by the way. I love being able to reference them. Yeah. And didn't go to parties and make a lot of friends because I became very judgmental of other people. That I was like, wasn't a very healthy place for me to be, especially because I wasn't the best. And so I didn't have the accolades. I didn't have the starter spot. I was not, everything that I achieved in the sport was a grind. It was very much a grind. And because of that, you constantly, at least for myself, was like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. And when you get in your head that you're not good enough and something goes wrong, it is just like, it turbocharges that inner critic. And that when you talk to that inner critic constantly, it becomes the only voice in your head. Yeah. And you've seen this with entrepreneurs too. Maybe not doing so good. They have that sense of failure. They have imposter syndrome. Your mind becomes your worst enemy and is the main thing that holds you back. And I remember a very specific story. I got put into a game and I played like I was just in flow, and this is flow state. And every touch, every pass, every shot was magic. And that's who I was, really. Like that was my skill showing up. And the coach then put me in again. And it didn't go so well because in that game I messed up initially, and then my mind held me back. I played pretty poorly. And he had a very straight talk with me. He said, you know what? You showed me something special the other day, and so I wanted to give you another chance, and here we are again. And if I had the confidence that I have now in myself, or if I could zoom in, if I knew what I know now about the mind and could create confidence from the practice, from the dedication, from the resilience, from all those things, I would not be in this podcast right now with you. I probably would have played professional sports. It would have been a very different world. And I don't regret that at all. It's just the power of your mind is underestimated by individuals that don't fully realize its potential and don't focus on developing it.
That's interesting. Yeah. I guess the way you explained it now, it all makes sense, but that's interesting. So again, you were unhappy in your career. You were doing all those things to get your PhD, and then what? Then what did you do? I mean, you get your PhD, you don't just automatically have a job.
So I have to
Or
correct
it's a
because it's an
hustle.
EDD. It's a Doctorate of Education in Organizational Leadership. I actually went when I was trying to figure out what type of degree I wanted to get in the doctorate space because I wanted credibility and I wanted to research. I actually volunteered in a lab, a social psych PhD lab, and hated it. And so I thought to myself, well, how do I get this type of terminal degree and have it be something that I enjoy? So I did some research. I volunteered at some other places. I flew to different college campuses and met with the directors and decided upon the program that I ended up taking because it was more of an applied program. People that tend to take it tend to be executives. They tend to be business owners. They tend to be consultants, people that actually want to go out there and build something or practice and not
Sure.
research. So I chose this path. I want to reverse for a second. It was not the initial path I took. I'm a pretty lazy high achiever, meaning I try to find the easiest path to accomplish something. I mean, I recommend that for every entrepreneur if you
I
can.
don't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
I've lived by that.
Yeah, whenever I start talking to business owners and they go, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, and I go, great. Does it bring you money? Like, what does it do for you? Is it
Yeah.
something that you should be paying attention to? Well, the easiest path for me when I figured out I wanted to get into talent development, when I wanted to change the world of leadership for high achievers like myself and create a more positive work environment, I decided to actually go to my boss, the boss that I didn't like, and go, this is what I want to do. I'm doing all the work that you're asking me to do. How do I get involved in this? Let me be a part of this from a corporate level. And she said, sure, go ahead. And one of the greatest lessons ever for a professional in a work environment is you need to be proactive and create the type of job that you want for yourself, even if you are an entrepreneur. And so I started actually working on some projects in talent development. And I was like, great, I'm pivoting my career. This is amazing. Manager of business operations on the executive team. And now I'm going to become someone on the talent development team. They're responsive. I'm getting involved in projects. Lo and behold, we get acquired for the second time. Everyone I was working with lost their job. They took all the projects, they centralized them, they put them on pause. So I'm sitting there going, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And I had the choice to go work in corporate, but again, I'm lazy, and that would have meant that I would have had to move and no guarantee of a future at the organization. And so I thought to myself, well, let's get a job in the field. And I didn't know what I know now about getting a job. So it was very difficult to go from a very different field to go in and then to transfer. I could do it now and I could rebrand now, but it was not going very fast. And so I thought to myself, well, I know I want to get into this space. I know I can go get credible by going to get my doctorate. I already had 2 graduate degrees at the time. So I knew, I liked school. I actually like learning. Let's go find a program that's going to help me become credible, help me do research so I can actually learn about this industry because I don't know a lot about it. And while I'm learning, I'll figure out which way I want to go. I know I want to encompass my life in this. I want to know I want to immerse myself in it. I need to know, I need to explore, I need to get curious to figure out what I want to build. And so I went, and it was a journey, as I mentioned, about flying, meeting different directors to convince them to let me into programs because I had no background in this space. So I actually ended up getting into a program that I enjoy, that I thought was going to help my career. And about a year and a half into it, I got exposed enough to the information that I knew what I wanted to build. And so I launched Live for Yourself Consulting. I pivoted my research. My research was focused on value congruence, so I could focus on alignment, and about job crafting and motivation within the workplace, and then I could build kind of my platform and my business off of that. And so here we are. So I got out of the graduate program 2018, left healthcare, and was able to make pretty good money at that point because I started in 2016 and build it to where we are today, where I'm working globally with different executive leaders. I have different faucets, different income streams within the talent development space, and mainly focus one-on-one with kind of directors to CEOs on helping them craft a career that's more fulfilling. And there's a lot of different components that led me to build the business. Like I started initially with in-person events. It's very different now based on kind of the thing that happened in 2020. And I was able to, activate different avenues and kind of different funnels and build greater relationships from there.
Yeah. So how does the process work? Do you use tools, those assessment tools that people use when they go into businesses, into corporate, so that they assess everybody's skills, so they understand who they're, what they're dealing with, what type of personality, what the strengths, weaknesses are? Or do you have your own set of tools when you go in and are dealing with an executive.
Mm-hmm. It kind of depends on where the client's coming from. So
Yeah.
I have a consulting faucet because I'm a senior talent management consultant as well. But then I have my personal one-on-one clients in my business that sometimes has some speaking engagements and workshops, but I don't really sell those. Those more just come from referrals or people that kind of reach out to me and want me to jump in. In the corporate side, yes, there are assessments that get included in kind of those contracts. There's a variety of them. Maybe from Hogan's, EQI, IPQ, the 360s. There's a bunch of acronyms, basically. You throw out an
Yeah,
acronym, there's
yeah.
probably an assessment for it. And then you build a coaching program off of that with different goals. But personally, like the one-on-one coaching in my personal practice is built off of the self-leadership model, the 3 C's of self-leadership. So Live for Yourself Consulting initially stood for the LIVE system, which was life, intentions, values, expectations. If you're an entrepreneur, create an acronym. It's really helpful for remembering what you do for a living. And it's also very easy it helps you create a platform and helps you become known for something and helps you create workshops and keynotes. It is much easier when you have a system that's based off of your personal beliefs, as well as, I went to school for this kind of stuff, so I integrate that into the framework itself. But the 3 C's of self-leadership are how I tend to work with my clients. And because I tend to work with executives that are currently working, as well as people that are in transition looking for a new role, those pillars tend to mean different things depending on the program that they have. And so my personal one-on-one coaching is very high touch and individualized to the client. So that can involve everything from career clarity, building self-confidence, branding, LinkedIn, resumes, cover letters, interview skills, but also just how do you manage your day-to-day as an executive leader? How do you motivate your team? But it is very much personal focused most of the time because I care deeply about living for yourself. And if you live for yourself, you can help, it helps create a more positive environment for other people to thrive too.
Yeah. When you were in graduate school, did they actually have a class in acronym building?
I'm an avid reader, and
Yeah.
I think there are two pieces of information that pop up in my brain about acronyms. One, don't get cute, because make sure it's spelled right. If you are trying to spell something, make it in an alliteration. Kind of try to make it either rhyme or have it be something that is the same letter or in some way, shape, or form, so it's easier to remember. No class on acronym building in grad school. Is just in terms of learning about entrepreneurship. I know it was a joke, but you can't overlook the benefit of having a personal framework that
Sure.
differentiates you from the market and an acronym that's easy for people to remember and that's catchy.
Yeah. No question about it. Well, it depends on what type of entrepreneur you are. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur selling services, yes. But if you're building a brand that's, based on a product, it's, acronyms aren't as important.
Yes, but rhyming or
Yeah.
alliteration or something. How are you memorable? I was actually talking to an entrepreneur the other day. He's writing an article for HBR for the Harvard Business Review, and he was telling me that they're trying to change his words. They're like the words that are related to his business and his model as
Yeah.
their headers for his article. And he's like, no, like that will destroy the brand recognition
Sure.
for SEO as well as for people to remember who he is.
Yeah. That's amazing. So, you know, when I first read your bio, something came to mind to discuss with you, because I'm an entrepreneur myself, built brands, mostly consumer focused products, but I'm also a student of business, and I read constantly, and I read about business, and I read these articles in every morning in the news, and it's constant this past year about bankruptcies, business bankruptcies. Macy's is closing down stores. And all I can think of when I read and I look at the numbers is, to me, most of the problems are ineffective management, ineffective leadership. And I don't know if you think about that when you read these articles, but I do. I'll give you an example. Bed Bath and Beyond. Bed Bath and Beyond went bankrupt, Chapter 7, right? The assets got sold. Two different companies bought some of the assets. So the brand name lives on, but all the stores are gone. And one of the things that was pointed out that I agree with is Bed Bath & Beyond never embraced e-commerce. They never did. And there was a person that was in charge all the way back in 2002 who just said it's nothing. People are always going to come to our stores. And when they did have a website, what they did on the website, and I don't know if you remember Bed Bath & Beyond's business model, but very coupon driven. Everything was about the coupons, and they were colored. I believe they were blue, and people, it was a social media. It always talked about the blue coupons. But even as late as 2017, all their website was a place for you to get coupons. And I keep thinking to myself, this crisis, this chapter 7, this liquidation, had everything to do with a leader who was in charge, who didn't see the future and just focused on stores. No different than the person who was in charge of Blockbuster at its demise, Jim, can't remember, the guy came from 7-Eleven, didn't see, could have bought Netflix for 50 million, didn't see the future of it, So that was something that came to mind as a discussion point for this show with your knowledge and your skill, obviously. So I was just wondering if we could get your take on that.
I'm finishing up a book right now. I don't know how you are when it comes to having unfinished projects in your brain, but
I have about 60.
Yeah. I'm what's the word? I'm trying to think about. I can plan ahead, but I don't like waiting. I want to work on it right now. I'm going to type while we talk. Oh,
Yeah.
it's almost done. But there's one of the motivations for the book was a phrase that I was talking to clients about, which was feel your feelings, think your thoughts, but don't believe your beliefs. So feel your feelings, think your thoughts, but don't believe your beliefs. And one day I'm going to make that into a clothing line or something. We'll see. We don't give our leaders enough time to think, to feel, and to question their beliefs. And there's also a great book called The Road Less Stupid. Have you read that before?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, and it's just about creating thinking time. The whole book actually could be summarized in that, and then it's a book of prompts in terms of questions to ask yourself when you're in thinking time. But way too often when I start working with an executive client, they're overworked.
Yeah.
They are in a stress response, so they're fight or flight, and they have no capability to be creative or be strategic.
Yeah.
And they're not able to know that they need to sell online. They're not able to know that streaming services are coming up because they're just in operation mode. And that is one of the greatest, I think, mistakes that entrepreneurs can make, is to think that today is going to be tomorrow and to not give yourself any time to question, well, what if it isn't? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that when you're a CEO or the ultimate leader of a brand or a company, I think you're in control to a certain extent. Certainly you have to answer to the board, but you're in control of allowing yourself to have that thinking time and to sort of surround yourself with the future. You can always put people on projects. Yes, people are overworked. Yes, there's always cuts. There's always, we've got to grow without spending any more money, that type of mentality. But I think when you're the CEO, you should always have a voice somewhere telling you about the future. And if you choose not to listen to it, I think that's the mistake. And that's what I see in a lot of companies. And it's been going on for years. I don't know if you've ever read the story about Amazon and how it really started. There's a book out there, off the top of my head, I can't remember it, but
The Everything Store?
Yeah, The Everything Store.
Yeah.
Yeah, you read that book?
Yeah.
And in there's a couple of really good points that I think entrepreneurs should pay attention to. The first one was Amazon was dying. They really weren't almost going to make it. And then
Yeah.
they cut a deal with Toys R Us, where Toys R Us actually paid them a significant amount of money for them to run the Toys R Us e-commerce store, right? So at that point in time, you're the CEO, you're the board, you're whoever, you're a decision maker. You see e-commerce, you want to be in the game, so you go and you take your competitor, but you just can't see that it's your competitor, and you give them access to all your customers, and that didn't happen just once. Borders Books, they put a guy in charge of the company who came out of the supermarket business. He comes in, doesn't understand e-commerce, doesn't believe in it, sees it as a cost center on his balance sheet, gives it to Amazon, and then buys champagne and pops the cork when he does that because he's so happy that he cut this deal. Meanwhile, Amazon's core business at that time was selling books,
Yeah.
and he gave them their customers. So, to me, those two points, those two events really gave Amazon its lift and really allowed Amazon to survive. But those CEOs both had people around them saying, you don't want to do this. We should do this ourselves. You don't want to do it. And it came down to, I don't want the share price to fall. It was really what it came down to.
Mm-hmm. So generally, when you're looking at like leadership traits, you want your executive leaders to have a high level of confidence, calm, composure. We don't see that all the time, but generally we'd prefer that. But they also need to be open to feedback, and they need to have people around themselves that maybe aren't as calm and composed all the time, because there is a benefit to looking out for the things that are going to destroy you,
Yeah.
that are going to potentially be risk, or to even be more innovative and think to the future. And this is when you say like management can be at the core of why there are all these bankruptcies. Well, it's also the composure of like the diversity of the team. So do you have the person that's going to drive? Do you have the person that's going to look out for the future? Do you have the person that's going to be a little bit more risk adverse and be able to balance the person that is risk heavy? And that diversity of team and kind of that diversity, they could have the same values, but diversity of thought and personality can be really important to help a company really survive.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you said that, because what I see in a lot of companies, and I have an agency and we work with a lot of brands, and what I see happen, in my limited time in corporate America, there was a period of time when I worked in corporate America for a 6 or 8 year stint. What I saw was promotions given out based on longevity, not based on the ability to move a company forward. A guy works for a company, here's a real life example. Best Buy, several years ago, founder of the company retires, and he says, he says to the board, this is the guy you want to run the company. He started here as in a store, grew to be a district manager, grew to be a store manager, district manager. Then he's a vice president of a region, but he should be the CEO. He lasted a year and a half in the job because he was totally underqualified for it. He probably Peter principled out when he became after a store manager, when he became a district manager. That was probably the height of his skill set, and it cost the company significantly because there was also a problem with some personal relationship he had while he was the CEO at the company, which caused a lawsuit. So I think that, to me, sometimes building a team is really based on longevity, not based on skill set or based on diverse, diverse talents.
Yeah, not strategically thinking about who's on your team.
Yeah.
And one of the issues too with people that tend to move up through the company at companies that don't have a very strong leadership development program is that they tend to like the company. And having someone run the company who's really happy at the company or throughout their career might disconnect them from the actual needs of retaining people that aren't as gung-ho or on board as this individual.
Yeah.
You need leaders that question their ability to lead to a
Yeah.
point. Like it's important to be confident, but also important to say, how do I get better? Am I doing this the way that I should? I can't tell you how many organizations I go into, and they hire us to do leadership development. So we're going in and we're training leaders, and the leaders are hungry. I wish I knew how to give feedback. Let's do some role plays. How do you delegate? Okay, let's talk about the fact that I'm, too detail oriented. How do I communicate as an executive? How am I more direct and concise and clear?
Yeah.
But then you ask them, and the majority of them, well, what have you done so far to learn these things?
Yeah.
And they go, nothing. I'm waiting for my company to do it. I'm waiting for them to teach us. What? So that's why that's like entrepreneurs have such a huge asset, and most of them, it's the desire to learn and grow something they don't know.
Yeah.
And we have to instill that trait everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the entrepreneurs I know myself. I've talked about this on this show so many times, but I started my first business when I was 27 years old, and I thought I knew more than I did, and it was just a disaster. It was a disaster of leadership. It was a disaster of process management. It just, on all fronts, it was a disaster, and it all came down to me. And I couldn't solve the problem while I was still there, so I wound up selling the business. It made a little bit of money, but I probably would have done better off if I worked for McDonald's for 4 years. But I took that money and that's when I went to graduate school. And it wasn't that I went to graduate school because I thought that was going to solve the problem, but I really thought that I had a problem thinking. I had a problem thinking and seeing and understanding what was wrong. And so, I went to graduate school, and I don't regret it. Did it teach me how to be a better entrepreneur? No. Did it teach me how to analyze numbers? And yes. Did it teach me some marketing frameworks? Yes. But while I was there, I got involved with another company, a small retail chain in Washington, D.C. And there I sort of blossomed into a better leader because I had to be a better leader. And in the back of my mind, I kept thinking about how bad of a leader I was in what I did with my own business. So it sort of forced me into thinking and reflecting and thinking about how to get people to do what I needed them to do. Because at that point I had teams, I had stores, I was managing stores and distribution operations and supply chain pieces. And yeah, but I carried that with me because after that, I started my own chain of stores, and again, I constantly was looking for new ways, and I still do it. I'm constantly looking for new ways to do the same job. Some of it I always think is partial laziness because I'm trying to figure out how I get my job done without really working hard at it, or using tools and technology. But part of it is also I always want to learn something new. So anyway,
I'm going to now jump back too. So I want to hear about your school experience because so many people will ask me, Ben, you have a lot of degrees. Should I go back to school? Should I go to school? What's your opinion?
I think it depends on what you're going to school for and what you want to get out of it. I went to college and I got good grades, but to be honest, I thought my path was going to be different, right? I grew up in the restaurant business around food, and I went to college, went to Miami, and I thought, I get a degree. It doesn't matter what the degree is because when I get out, I'll start a restaurant, right? While I was down there, I was working in some of the hotels and restaurants in Miami, and I decided this is a terrible lifestyle. People are working until, you were a bartender, you're working until, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. You know what goes on with folks after you get out of work, you sit around, you have a couple of drinks, and the next thing you know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and you're rolling in home. And it's really a terrible lifestyle. So I knew that, by the time I graduated college, I didn't want to do that. So I went in the retail direction, but I decided to go to graduate school because after I did that business, I realized I didn't know some of the things that I should know. But I didn't think I was going to learn them at school, but I thought that I was going to learn how to understand how to learn them, if that makes sense. It was going to give me the tools to learn how to learn things, or to uh, look at things differently, or read into things differently, which in some cases it did, especially when it comes to numbers. I really understood. My major was, it was an MBA with major in finance, minor in marketing, but I really did understand numbers at that point, and something that I didn't get in undergrad. But I enjoyed it. I mean, I thought so. I mean, it depends on the type of person you are as to whether or not you need it, right? I needed it. Sometimes I need somebody to hit me over the head and say, you need to understand this a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
if
Yep.
that makes
And
sense.
that's one really, uh, it's an immersive method to understand it, right? Especially if you show up in a way that you are giving it the attention that it needs for you to get that level of exposure. Like, I had two different experiences. I went for my MBA in entrepreneurial management, and I did a business degree, and I read every entrepreneurial book I could find. I almost like self-taught. And so that degree program wasn't the most effective.
Yeah.
But then I also did an MPH in health policy. And then, not to mention the doctorate degree, but the exposure to a new field of learning
Yeah.
and being forced to be, to go through different exercises and papers, and to be surrounded by professionals that are also in a field is priceless. And you can do that in any way. It doesn't have to be in school.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to learn something, surround yourself with people that know a lot about it, teachers. Surround yourself with people that care about it. So other students, be forced to do exercises and homework and write and to think critically on the topic. It's like, oh, that makes sense. Of course I'm going to learn something. Why can't I do that about anything else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do have friends that I always think are a bit more astute than I am. They can read something and they get it, and they can see the revelation in it. And for me, it's not as easy. I have to read things over and over again. Sometimes I have to have things explained to me. But like with social media, I have a great team that manages social media, and sometimes they have to explain to me what's going on because I look at it too pragmatically, and they're like, we start looking at what people are trying to say with emojis, or why this is good, or some of the TikTok videos and the methodology behind them. I have to ask, because but then once you explain it to me, then I can start to say, oh, I understand what's happening here, why the algorithm is working and why it's picking it up. And
Mm-hmm.
then, so, but yeah, sometimes I just need help.
Sometimes I just outsource it. I don't actually want to learn that thing. I'm again lazy hustler,
Yeah.
and will do the minimum that I have to do to accomplish the task I'm aiming for.
Yeah. I do agree with that. And I do try and do that. And I do outsource some things, but I can't, I have to understand, in order for me to manage it, I have to understand what's happening, right? I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. A couple of years ago, well, actually over 15 years ago, we were doing direct response TV for one of the brands we owned. And we had, I never did direct response TV. I was strictly an e-commerce guy. And I listened to people tell me about, you got to get a media buyer, and the media buyer's telling me we have to spend money here, and you got to look at the demographic, and you got to look at what channels you're going to show on to meet that demographic. And I wasn't seeing a return, and it just didn't make sense to me. And we had spent significant money, seven figures, and it was stressing me out. And so, but one thing, so when I started to look at it myself and spend more time analyzing it, what I noticed was that I was I was buying spots in some very um, unknown or unused channels,
Mm.
but the spot costs were so low that all I needed to do was sell one or two units, and I made that money back. And so it occurred to me that it had nothing to do with the demographic or the psychographic or the channel. it all came down to the spot cost. How much are you paying for that cost? So I took away the media buyers because there were systems in place that Google had at the time that you could buy your own media on TV. Um, and so I started to buy Fox Sports 2, which was not Fox Sports. And I was paying, I think, $90 for a 30-second spot, $50 for a 15-second spot. But I was making my money back on every single one of the spots. And I was buying so many that I was getting free spots. So it was reducing my average cost. And then I was running overnights, and, which were even less expensive because they assume nobody's up, but people were up. And so my effective cost was almost roughly $45 per spot. And all I needed to do was sell 2 units. And I was doing it all day long. And then I would try and find these hidden gems of low cost spots on TV. And today you can do the same thing with connected TV. But the only beauty of connected TV is you're not guessing who you're talking to. With connected TV, you know who you're talking to because they're logged in. That you know who's logged into what show on Netflix. So you're delivering, right? Just like a DSP in advertising, you're delivering a spot to a person who's got the most interest in it.
I just love this story because it highlights again, is there something that you're struggling with and uncomfortable with? And do you have the confidence or the initiative or the intention to go figure it out and to go do something? And honestly, a lot of people struggle with that. They're afraid of failure. They don't know where to start. They don't feel that they're responsible or accountable. They think that I'm paying someone, so they should do it. Instead of, how do I learn this on my own? And can I handle this? And I think that trait, I can handle this, I can figure this out, I'm going to figure this out, is such a powerful, entrepreneurial, it needs to be like a badge. We need to create entrepreneur badges that we just give out to people. They submit a story to us and they get a badge. It's going to be a badge. Here's your intentional badge, your growth learning, your mindset badge, or whatever we want to say. But I think it's overlooked. And you think it's almost like, doesn't that just make sense that if you're struggling with something, you go work on it, you go find resources for it?
Yeah, I do think that a lot of entrepreneurs do that, but I don't see a lot of that happening in corporate America. But I do see entrepreneurs that live in fear. I have seen entrepreneurs hit the wall. Look, when you start a business, there gets to be a point where you're at an inflection point where you think, I'm either going to make it or I might not make it. And those people that look at that, I might not make it, and say, I still have to power through, right? They're not afraid of fear, but the people who are afraid of fear, they back off and they end it and they go back to corporate America. And I tell entrepreneurs that I work with, look, what's the worst case scenario? You fail, you're not going to die. You're probably going to be able to, if anything happens, you're going to probably lose money. That's the worst case scenario. I'm sure that you've probably got some place to live where you're going to have a roof over your head. I'm sure you can eat, and I'm sure you'll be able to get a job back, but you're not going to die. So what are you afraid of?
This goes straight to the 3 C's of self-leadership. So if you are stuck and not taking action, you generally don't have a vision. You don't know where you're going. So you don't have clarity. You also don't know what you stand for. You start to doubt it. And so generally you have to reconnect to your meaning or who you think you really are, or what you're trying to create. And that leads to more confidence. But generally also, if you're not taking action, you don't have confidence. So maybe this person didn't think about how they were going to live their life. So they're stuck in the fear of, I'm not going to be able to afford, I'm going to live on the streets. When in actuality, losing a business is like losing a job.
Yeah.
Prepare for it, save some money, have some protections, build some positive relationships, you have skills, you can go get another job, you can start a new business. So you build confidence either through learning skills or just personal belief in yourself through those types of conversations. And then control. So the last C is control. You control what you can.
Yeah.
And you show up. Despite being demotivated or afraid or not feeling that great, you show up and you build a life that is intentionally focused on what you're trying to actually achieve. And too often, working with a professional trying to start a business, and I have no time.
Yeah.
And they go, really? What do you tell me your week? And, oh, they have time. They're just choosing not to spend time on the things that they care about. So how are you
Yeah.
controlling your schedule and how you're showing up?
Yeah.
So those 3 C's tend to relate to if you get stuck, if you're facing fear, if you don't have a growth mindset, if you're not going to intentionally learn something, we tend at some point, if we're stuck, something is off within one of those pillars.
Yeah. And what are the 3 C's again?
Clarity, confidence, and control.
And is that a system that I've never?
Oh, yes. It's a
Honestly,
lovely acronym that I created after my doctoral
oh,
program.
you created it.
Yes. So I was working with clients at the time with a framework, or like a decision-making framework. And I noticed that certain clients were more successful than others. And, well, what are the traits that are leading them to success? Where are we creating positive outcomes? And the 3 C's of self-leadership came up. And also I was wondering, well, how do I integrate leadership into my professional and personal development program? And I go, well, it's not really about leadership. It's about self-leadership. So I use a lot of the information and research out there in terms of leadership development and focused on ourselves and focused on individuals. And so came up with 3 C's of self-leadership from there.
That's excellent. I never heard that before, but it makes, I have to think about it a little bit, but it makes, on the surface, it makes sense. Say it again. So I don't.
The 3 C's of self-leadership are clarity, confidence, and control. Clarity, confidence, and control.
I have to remember that. I've got to put that in the notes. Clarity, confidence, and
I got it everywhere. Just find my name; it'll be there.
yeah.
Entrepreneurial tip: assign frameworks to your name.
No, I mean, to think about it and to use it and to tell people about it, because I do work with some entrepreneurs now, and although it's not really a main part of what I do, but I work with the University of Maryland School of Entrepreneurship and try and give young entrepreneurs some direction. And because I think one of the problems that young entrepreneurs have today is they think that they're going to create this great pitch deck because they saw, the 10-page pitch, the perfect 10-page pitch deck. They put it together. They think they're going to walk into a room and present it and walk out with a check for $10 million to start the business. And it doesn't work that way. And you got to give them some dose of reality and whether or not they're equipped to even get to that point. Because I think one of the evaluators that a potential investor is going to look at is you may be able to have the idea and get started, but are you equipped to deal with the growth and managing that growth in a profitable way and a streamlined way?
Work with a lot of investors, and they're not generally focused on the idea. They're focused on the person, and they're trying to find people that are going to create something great. It might not be this first thing, but it's going to be the second or third thing. But I don't know any entrepreneur that has built one thing in their entire life and then never built anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a supplement, there's things that I've done too. And I had a different service-based business in the past. I think it's just, hopefully it's part of our blood, and people are trying to say, like, who has that gene, and who has the resilience and that magicness that's going to not give up and create something special. That's going to hit I'm almost out of business right now, but I know that there is a light at the end of this tunnel, and they're actually going to turn the light on themselves. They're going to create the light.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the conversation we've had. We ran a little bit long. We sort of we went all 50 minutes. We didn't really take a break. So I'm running out of time. I've got to start focusing on closing it up. But any last minute tips, things that focusing on entrepreneurs and behaviors and that type of thing. Any tips?
Yeah, I talked about my passion and purpose in the past and the kind of the mistake that I made. And this one stands out the most to me. I'm happy to share another one if you don't like it, though.
Go ahead.
It's that very often entrepreneurs tend to think that the thing that they're creating is them. It's their identity. It's who they are. It's the one thing that they need to do for their life. And we just talked, entrepreneurs will create other businesses. You will do other things. it's not that important that you have this thing right now. It's important that you are just building and you're learning. Often we think we find something and it becomes our purpose, and then we go do it, then we go create it. But that's actually the other way around. You actually choose what your purpose is. You explore it, and through yourself, you then are able to discover it. And it might not be the thing you're creating now, it might be the thing that you create later on. But you actually have to, instead of think that you've already found it, think that more so that you're just being curious and exploring. And so let me phrase that more in a single statement. Nothing can be greater than you. If you choose to focus on something, for it to be your overall intention or your purpose, you've created it. And so you get to choose what it means for you. And it should never be greater than who you are. It should never drain you. You should never feel obligated to it.
Yeah.
You should always feel like you actually own it.
Yeah, that's a great point. We had someone on early on, and they were talking about when entrepreneurs sell. They help entrepreneurs sell their businesses at a certain point. And what they were saying was that when entrepreneurs sell, they wind up getting into a depression for a little while, because that's their identity, and they feel like they got rid of their identity. I personally have never had that problem, because, I never got that attached to a business. I'm a little bit more pragmatic about it, but, and I've had plenty of failures that have been disasters. So, but yeah, I think that you're right. It's not your identity.
I got one more, because you said the word failure, and I was actually talking to a client last night about this. May you live long enough for your failures to become successes.
Yeah, you're right. May I live that long. Well, I've got to wrap it up. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you taking the time. I think it was great. I love the discussion. I love the 3 C's. So where can everybody get in touch with you?
Yeah, first off, connect with me on LinkedIn, Dr. Benjamin Ritter, and then check out liveforyourselfconsulting.com. Live for Yourself Consulting has all our media, it has our coaching information, it has our podcasts, and it also has an opportunity to book some time and learn more about our services.
Yeah. Everything will be also in the description. I put in the description of the show. Once after the show airs, it'll show up and be content forever on E360 TV, and your description is in there with your links to your. So if anybody needs the links directly, they can go there and onto the show, and they'll see the links to LinkedIn and to the website. So thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. And I've just got a couple of things to close up the show with, but it was really great talking to you. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, so did I. Thanks for having me, Phil.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right. Hey, it was another good one. I thought that was a good discussion. I really enjoyed talking to him, and I really enjoyed his point of view. So go check out his website. Go check out some of the things that he's doing, and hopefully his book will come out soon, so we can learn a little bit more about the 3 C's. I do like that concept. But again, go to my site, philmasiello.com. You can download a free book on business planning for yourself. And then again, if you ever need our services, you can always find me at crunchgrowth.com and philmasiello.com. All right. Have a good night, and we appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you next week. Next week, we're going to focus on PR, which is a great tool when you're trying to get noticed, when you're starting your business and you're trying to get noticed, because when you think about it, press is the ultimate influence. Influencers are great. I'm not downplaying it, but press is the ultimate influence. And we'll talk about that, and we'll show some examples of how to use press to get noticed, get your business noticed. Thanks again, and have a great night.